at one point I realized I had 12, 13 scripts that nobody was seeing merit in.
Okay.
So in 2008, I had a heart attack at the age of 29.
Oh.
Then I had swine flu in 2010. Apparently, I was the only survivor in Maharashtra of swine flu. Every other case died.
Uh-huh.
While I was making Ajji, I had the first stage of prostate cancer. So I was in treatment while I was shooting Ajji.
Uh-huh.
In 2014, I bought a gun and I tried to kill myself, but somehow I didn't pull that trigger because even the act of killing myself at that point suddenly didn't make sense. So I've been there, I've been in those dark places because when you start doubting your own creative journey, it takes you into spaces that you can't navigate.
Hi, welcome to Where We Talk About Films, the podcast where we talk about films. My name is Vidar Joshi. I'm your host, and this is the last episode of season one of Where We Talk About Films. I know it's been like a really small journey, but it's been a great one. And having these conversations with these beautiful, supremely talented artists, they've taught me so much. We're planning to have another season pretty soon, maybe next year, but pretty soon. So about today's episode, we have with us Mr. Devashish Makhija. He's a writer, director, filmmaker, the beautiful storyteller. Now, if you have seen his films, you know this episode can get a little intense, and it does, but it's so much fun. So let's just get into it.
You made that slit to hear me scream, but I won't. I will instead give you silence. These lines from one of the poems written by our today's guest described his cinema for me. He chooses to show and not to tell. His camera never turns away or shies away from the realities which we are usually scared to see. His cinema is dark, it's gritty, it's like a mirror to our society. He's one of the strongest voices we have in Indian cinema right now. Today we have with us an author, a poet, a writer, director who has given us films, amazing films like Ajji, Bhonsle, short films like Agli Bar, Tandav, Ilaichi, and so many more. Please welcome Mr. Devashish Makhija. Hi sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
How are you? What's going on after Bhonsle's release on Sony Live? How's things changed?
That was short lived.
Haha.
Like most releases, a release is, I think, not something that you work backwards from in life. You
Yeah.
make your films because you want to make them. This film took 9 years from script to release.
Mhm.
So that lasted a little while, and now it's back to fighting COVID, staying sane,
Haha.
trying to figure what next in life.
Okay. Going
Just
back.
just now, 2 hours
Uh-huh.
ago, my building got quarantined because we had a
Oh,
COVID case. So
okay.
life carries on.
So going back to the starting, so I just want to know what was your journey from writing children's book to making short films and now making feature films. What was that journey like?
So my journey didn't start like that. It started
Uh-huh.
with feature films, and not many people know about it because I had a lot of feature films not get made for a very long time.
Yeah.
I assisted on Black Friday in 2003, then I
Mm-hmm.
assisted on Bunty or Babli in 2004,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Huh.
then I assisted on Jaane Tu Ya Jaane Na in 2005,
Okay.
and then I got signed by Yashraj to write and direct an animation film in the
Okay.
Yashraj
Uh-huh.
then Disney, the LA Disney tie-up. It was a
Okay.
tie-up of two films. They finished one called Roadside Romeo, which
Hmm.
released, and that film got battered because it was not a very good film, and Disney pretty much lost faith. And mine was the second film. I was in production for over 3 years,
Oh,
and
okay.
they pulled the plug on my film. So, if things had worked out, I would have been a Yashraj filmmaker. But I lost 3 years of my life there. So
Uh-huh.
I walked away from that journey and tried to go on a different journey. I don't
Uh-huh.
know why. I mean, circumstances sort of decide these things for you. You don't
Uh-huh.
decide them yourself. And then a lot of films that I was trying to make back then for about 7, 8 years didn't happen. I
Okay.
had films that started and stopped and got 70% shot and got left in the cans. So this happened over 15, 16 projects.
Okay.
And then around that period, when my feature films were not getting made, I was I was restless. I didn't want to be at the mercy of just one medium, because what happens with features, unlike almost any other medium of expression, including short films, you're at the mercy of other people's money.
Yeah.
And that was very frustrating, that if someone decides to walk away from my film or decides to pull out money, everything goes back to zero. I don't want to be at the mercy of other people's money all the time. So I started dabbling in a lot of other media. I did a graphic art show in 2008. I wrote 2 children's books. I wrote a book of short stories that
Yeah.
got published by HarperCollins. I wrote a novel which is interestingly out this year.
Okay.
And then I started making a lot of short films, because I wanted to prove to myself that I'm capable. Because,
Yeah.
when you have 15 shelved feature films, 15, that's no mean
Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
You start doubting whether you're really capable of making feature films, whether this dream that you're harboring is actually a myth and you might never get there. So I made short films like I was possessed in those 2 years, 2014, 15. I made 5 short films back to back. And that changed the game for me.
Okay.
And I had a lot of people tell me that in the decade that my features weren't getting made, to not make shorts, because shorts are made by young people and students. And I didn't buy that. I thought, if you want to tell a story and you want to tell it in the visual, audio-visual medium, it doesn't matter what the duration is. It could be 1 minute, it could be 3.5 hours. It's still an audio-visual medium.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's this one film called Tandav that sort of pretty much rewrote the rules in 2016. That opened the doors for Ajji, and then Ajji opened the doors for Bhonsle. So it was one thing that led to another, and finally my feature film started getting made.
Okay.
So it's really the reverse journey. I started with feature film.
Okay. So 15 to 16 times the films got shelved, and after every time, how do you get back? How do you get back on your feet that, okay, this time it will work, this time it will work? And like there must be some day where you are like, maybe it's not happening for some other reason. So how do you get back on your feet, and then finally when you come back, you make a film like Ugly Bar, then Ajji and Bhonsle and everything? How do you do that?
So yes, like I said, you have a lot of self-doubt, and I had my dark phases. Now I've only in the last year or so I've started talking about this. I've been on panels about mental health and suicide, and I've been finally talking about what I went through in those years. But when you're going through it, you don't really have an outsider's perspective. No? You can't step out of yourself and look at yourself.
Yeah.
You don't know that you're in a dark place. You just know that you're desperate and you need something to work. So one film gets shelved, you write another. A second gets shelved, you write a third. Until at one point, I realized I had 12, 13 scripts that nobody was seeing merit in. So in 2008, I had a heart attack at the age of 29. Then I had swine flu in 2010. Apparently, I was the only survivor in Maharashtra of swine flu. Every other case died. While I was making Ajji, I had the first stage of prostate cancer. So I was in treatment while I was shooting Ajji. In 2014, I bought a gun and I tried to kill myself, but somehow I didn't pull that trigger, because even the act of killing myself at that point suddenly didn't make sense. So I've been there. I've been in those dark places, because when you start doubting your own creative journey, it takes you into spaces that you can't navigate.
Okay.
So I know that's a lot of information all at once, but I've only started talking about it in the last year. So I try and be as matter of fact about it as possible, because it's in the past now.
Yeah. Okay. So from that dark place and the cinema you're making, and on the other hand, you have written children books. How did that, like, how do you switch like that? Like
so again, those children's books and my graphic art that I did a show of, that was like 6-7 years of work. Some of my stories in my book of short stories, they're not. These are the stories that sort of kept me above water. Just the slightly hopeful narratives that kept my energy balanced. Because if I had only dabbled with the dark stories that I had, if I only dabbled with my anger against the system, I may not have survived that phase.
Yeah.
So somewhere that little bit of hope that these stories that didn't just question, also I'm always trying to question through my work, question the establishment, question a certain status quo, question what our government does. So in that questioning, you can either choose to make it uh, dismal and despairing and hopeless, which to some extent Ajji and Bhonsle are,
Uh-huh.
even Ugly Bar, or you can try and find a way forward through that darkness, which Tandav, for example, does.
Yeah.
And my books of stories for little children, that those stories do that as well. But for me to find a balance between those two, I don't need to find that balance inside the same story. But if I'm telling separate stories simultaneously, it sort of keeps the energy sort of balanced. So even now,
Okay.
when people have only seen Ajji and Bhonsle as my feature film, so people think I'm this dark filmmaker. But in the 16 films I got shared, almost half of them were not this dark.
Okay. Uh-huh.
In fact, even I was trying to set up 3 films right now. 2 of those 3 films are, yes, they are political films, but they're not as despairing and nihilistic as Bhosle and Ajji were.
Okay.
It just so happened that those films got made first.
Okay. Coming back a little to your short film journey. So you have mentioned that short films and feature films are two different mediums and you treat them differently. Can you elaborate
Yeah.
on that? Like, what is your process of developing a short film? And how do you decide that this idea is for a short film and this one is for the feature film?
So it's hard to decide that once you have an idea. What I do, and because, like I said, in the period that my films weren't getting made, I opened myself up to many other mediums of expression, short films being one. So when you're, and I'm sure every writer or every creative person coming up with ideas faces this. When you sit down to crack one idea, you don't only think about that one idea. You think about, you start getting several other ideas in
Yeah.
that process of arriving at that idea, and we keep noting them down.
Yeah.
So I keep making files and folders and start dividing these ideas over many Word documents.
Okay.
So what happens over time is that you end up with, like at least I ended up with over 1,500 ideas
Okay.
for stories. Now those stories can become children's books, they can become animation films, they can become short films, they can become feature films, they can become whatever I choose to make them.
Okay.
Now
Yeah.
I don't know if an idea lends itself to a short or a feature when it first comes to me. What I have learned to do is I work backwards from an opportunity. Because in those years when my films weren't getting made, I started looking for opportunities.
Okay.
So when an opportunity presents itself, like someone tells me, I want to make a short film with you, I have 2 lakhs.
Okay.
So I rush back home, I go through these 1,500 ideas, and I pick that one idea that might fit this opportunity.
Okay.
So that's the process that I have arrived at, where I don't like to waste an opportunity.
Okay.
So when you start doing that, then you don't really pigeonhole an idea, and then you're exploring, you're seeing which of these ideas really lends itself to the opportunity.
You mentioned money, sir. So when you were making short films, it was kind of just starting out. The whole section of short films was just starting out. And even right now, the commerce part in short films is not figured out. So how did that work out? Like money in short films,
It
revenue
never will be.
Okay.
There is no revenue model. In all the short films I made, all 5 of them, they were made for different platforms. Terribly Tiny Talkies, I made their first short film. Movies.com, Thunder, I made their first short film. Pocket Films, I made their first short film. So the first short film that each of these platforms made was made with me. So even they didn't know what they were going to do with them. I got budgets of 50,000 rupees to make Ugly Bar, Elaichi, and Absent. In 50,000, even back in 2015, it was really hard to pull off anything. 50,000 rupees just gets spent in 5 days of food and travel in a city like Bombay. So I also, because for me, it was, my prerogative was to get something made. So when I'm doing that, I don't try to see what money it's going to make me, because I've spent too many years not seeing my films get made. So even back then in 2015-16, especially after Ahalya really changed the game for short films.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk of how do we make money of short films? Is there a revenue model? Will something come into place? And on every platform, every time I was asked to speak about it, I said, yeah, look at what this medium of short films offers you. Whether it's a 50,000 rupee short film or a 15 lakh rupee short film. What it offers you is complete and unfiltered freedom, because you don't know who you're making the short film for. Unlike a feature, the minute you make a feature, you're being spoken to by distributors and your producers about where will we release it, who will watch it, which platform will it come on, will we make our money back in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So all talk becomes about recovery. But with a short film, nobody talks about recovery because you don't know where the audience is. And when that happens, you are free to do whatever you want. Why would I hold that freedom? Why would I make that subject to a revenue model? I refuse to do that. So I said, I'm not going to talk about a revenue model. I don't expect money in return. I just want to hold on to that freedom, because that freedom has allowed me to make films like Agli Baar and Tanda. I couldn't have made a film like Agli Baar in the feature film space.
Going back a little bit, you said that someone told you that I'm giving you 2 lakh rupees, and you came back home, went through those 1500 ideas and then picked one. Then from that, picking up that one idea to developing that into a film like Agli Baar, because it's one of my favorite short films ever. So what is that process of picking up that idea, what is the form of that idea which turns into a screenplay then?
In every film actually has a very different process, at least for me, because I try, even though every filmmaker I know even subconsciously ends up repeating a certain motif that becomes his or her signature. But I try to do something different with every film. And when I try to do that, I don't like to hold on to a process that I might have gone through previously. So before Agli Baar, I made this film called Elaichi with Terribly Tiny Talkies. So on Elaichi as well, they gave me 50,000 rupees budget, start to finish. I had to do everything in 50,000. But because for many years before that, my films were not getting made, I got a little ambitious. I said, I want to shoot on a red camera. I wanted to look good and all of those things. But the minute you shoot on a big camera, you need that many lights. The minute you bring in those many lights, you need those many people. And my budget went way overboard. I spent another 75,000 rupees. All of that came out of my pocket. So every last rupee that I had saved in the years preceding Elaichi, I spent on Elaichi. Then when I got a chance to make Agli Baar 6 months later, I realized I can't make that same mistake because I don't have extra money to put into this film. I have to see it through in 50,000 rupees. How do I do that? I can't be at the mercy of big cameras. So what cameras can I use? I can use whatever I can get for free. And back in 2015, even a Canon 5D was hard to source for free. So I spoke to my ADs, I spoke to friends, and I figured that the only cameras I can actually get, and I didn't have a smartphone. I started using a smartphone just a year ago. So I didn't have a phone camera of my own either. So I realized I can borrow phones and I can borrow laptops and I can use those cameras. And I wrote the script on the basis of that.
Oh, nice.
So I worked backwards from the opportunity.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I didn't have a story idea.
Okay. But did you have like an idea of what you want to speak about? What do you want to talk about?
Yes, I always know what politics I want to talk about. I'm very clear about that. If I didn't have a take on, my take on the country and development and societal issues, I don't think I would have been a filmmaker. Because for me, it's important that I have this to say. Otherwise, I don't know what to do as a filmmaker. So I had been working with slum rehabilitation in Bombay for a while. I had been working with tribal rights for a while. And I had come in touch with this group called Video Volunteers who, around the time of the Godhra riots in 2002, it was the first time that the Supreme Court, the first time in the history of India that the Supreme Court allowed amateur video footage to be used as evidence in court. So there was this group called the Video Volunteers, a group of activists, amateur activists, who went around during the riots empowering people to shoot. They said if someone attacks you, someone wants to kill you, someone burns your house, just shoot. Get us the footage because at least we'll be able to incriminate them. So that idea stayed with me. So that became the technological, thematic idea at the heart of Agli Baar.
Okay. Now coming to feature films, I have this small anecdote to share that I missed the film Ajji in Mami. So when it was in theaters, I went to watch the film, and just like right ahead of me, there was a very old couple. They came to watch some other film, but that show was full, so they got the tickets of Ajji, and they were sitting right in front of me. When the film finished, they were destroyed. Like, they didn't move. They were like, "What just happened?" And that's when I realized how. And even after that, when I came back home, I was not speaking. I was not doing anything. That's how impactful that film was. You stayed with that film for a way longer time than I did. What was your process of getting into that film and then getting out? Was it difficult? Because it takes you to a very dark place as an audience as well.
That was the year I got prostate cancer.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in the period leading up to the writing of the film, my co-writer Mirat Trivedi, and he did a lot of research. We spoke to a lot of young survivors of rape and tried to, because we were two men trying to write the perspective of
Yeah.
women of many ages. So it's very, and we have seen enough films where even the most well-meaning men get that perspective wrong. I don't know if we got that perspective right in Ajji. It's a, I mean,
Yeah.
cultivating a gender lens is a process, and Ajji for us was one stage in that process.
Yeah.
So even today, I feel that there are a lot of things that I think we got wrong in Ajji, and hopefully in another film later on, we'll probably get right. So in that process of trying to understand what a woman or what a little girl or what an old lady would go through at the receiving end of patriarchy and misogyny all their lives in a milieu where they don't have any recourse to justice, sort of took me to a place where I started hating the fact that I was a man. And I can say this with this kind of dispassionate clarity now, but when I was going through it, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was feeling this. But when I tried to understand why I was sick the way I was, because it got pretty bad. During my shoot, I was on 4,000 mg of antibiotics every day, and there was blood in my urine, and I couldn't understand why this was happening. And only when I finished the shoot of Ajji and I revisited what I felt and I started trying to understand the psychology of what I went through, I sort of discovered, talking to a lot of healers and people who work with, psychiatric roots of physiological problems, that hating on your masculinity is what causes the prostate, which is the gland that is the seat of the male hormones. It causes that to malfunction. And that was probably what happened to me during Ajji, and I didn't realize it. And over the year after Ajji, I got into Bhonsle, but I was working actively on my mind and my energies to sort of reach a place where I could make peace with what I felt. So yes, working with material like that, especially, like I kept saying back then, I kept telling my team, I need this horror to transfer to the audience.
Yeah.
I don't want to make the viewer exempt from this horror. So when you become the medium to transfer the horror to a viewer, it's passing through you.
Yeah.
So somewhere you are going to be the first collateral.
Okay.
And again, I didn't know it was happening to me then, but it affected me before it affected you.
Yeah. Okay. And one of, like the small girl, how did you work with her on the content is very disturbing. So what was your process with a child actor in a film like this?
So it's not just a child actor, it's a girl child actor. And it's also material that is about her sexuality. So we had to be very careful. So luckily for me, I had an associate director on this film, Pooja, who was a very, very strong feminist girl from Haryana, who had spent her life fighting patriarchy in her orthodox world where she comes from.
Yeah.
And I had the advantage of casting a very wonderful feminist woman as Ajji, Sushma Deshpande.
Yeah.
So I pretty much actually allowed them to take control of the little girl's performance.
Okay.
So Sushma almost became like a co-director for me when it came to dealing with the little girl. She spoke to the girl's parents. We sort of found a way for the parents to have those difficult conversations with that little girl because she was underage.
Yeah.
And although you can't sit her down and tell her everything that she's going to go through, because she's not old enough yet to be able to
Yeah.
process all of that, but you cannot do anything without her consent. So it was a very tricky tightrope. So Pooja and Sushma actually pretty much buffered me from that. They spoke to her, they handled her on a day-to-day basis. They sat her down and sensitized her to what the scenes were going to be about and how it was pretty much going to be play acting, and we are not going to allow her to be hurt.
Yeah.
And what this actually means for her when she grows up. So there was a lot of those difficult conversations that happened over the 3 months preceding the shoot.
Okay.
So it was a very difficult process, and I had to have women of the kind that I did, Sushma and Pooja, to help me navigate this with that little girl, Sharvani.
Okay. And people, like, after watching Ajji or even Bhonsle, people used, like, a lot of people say that very dark films, this, that dark films. But you have mentioned that if I don't put these ideas into my films, I slit my throat. You have said that in an interview. And so what goes internally? Are you looking for answers, or do you want to just put these questions which are in your head out into the world for the society, or are you looking for answers yourself? And do you find answers? What's the process? Like, what's the internal process?
I think we're all looking for answers, whether we like it or not, whether we admit it or not. We want answers. Nobody wants to go through life just carrying that increasing burden of questions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not easy to find these answers, because the kind of questions that hopefully my films raise are questions that sort of make us doubt everything that we have become in society.
Yeah.
The men that we have become, there's the rot in the ideas of religion, of caste, of region, of class. So all of these go back, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 years. They don't go back just 50 years.
Yeah.
So to find answers or solutions to these rots is next to impossible. Maybe if we begin that process now, collectively, each one of us, we might arrive at answers 8 generations down the line. We won't arrive at answers in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
So, although yes, I want answers, I know I can't find them, and I know that my films definitely can't throw them up. Because to throw up an answer is to actually be dishonest with the material that you're navigating. So the most I can do is throw up the questions that we don't want to ask. There are a lot of questions that we want to run away from as a society and as people. So I think I simply then I lighten the load on myself by sharing those questions with everyone who watches my films.
Okay.
Because before Ajji, like I said, I had so many unmade feature films that all those questions inside me probably almost gave me cancer.
Yeah.
But now that I've gotten a chance to throw those questions out to thousands of people, that energy gets dissipated. No? So now we'll all collectively carry the load, and hopefully I won't get cancer.
Yeah, we hope that that doesn't happen, I mean. And actually, I was watching one of your interviews, and you mentioned that we as human beings, we put ourselves in the center and everything else is on the edges. And that's something you have an issue with, but you also accept that you're a part of that system. So now how do you question and also answer these questions which are so deeply rooted in humanity in general? So how do you question and answer these questions into your films and in general, like just for yourself as well?
Like I said, I mean, I can't answer them, but the least I can do is throw those questions up for you to think about it as well. And I had said this, and the word I use often for this is anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism is placing the human being at the center of everything. So, like in a Rahi Murge Pe Matro, you treat, I mean, we all treat that murga as food. We don't see the murga as a creature that might have a consciousness of its own. So, although I don't eat chicken, but in shooting that murga and making that murga get halal for my shot, I was as complicit as someone who ate that murga.
Yeah.
So, in trying to make a comment on anthropocentrism, I became anthropocentric because my film became very important for me. The murga became secondary. So I can't escape it either, because I am born a human being. So that bothers me. And I can't answer that. I don't know a solution to that other than let's eradicate human beings and let this earth start from scratch. Hopefully, with COVID, we'll reach a place where that will happen. But if I can't answer it, the least I can do is make everybody think about it.
Okay. What are your cinematic influences? Do you have any? Like these kind of films you watch, what kind of films do you like? And are there any very heavy cinematic influences in the films you make?